Good morning. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Is this on? Okay. Welcome to the Common Read, sponsored by the Department of English and World Languages, the Southeastern Writing Center, and the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. We are here today with Reginald Dwayne Betts. We want to welcome all of our students here to Pottle Auditorium and also to those of you who are streaming in your classrooms. I want to thank the Southeastern Writing Center, the staff, the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, Dr. Jeff Wright, our dean, the staff of the Department of English and World Languages, the Southeastern Channel, who is streaming these events, and the staff here at Pottle Auditorium for making us welcome in this space. And thanks to you, our students, for your interest and your engagement with Mr. Betts' wonderful poetry. We want to extend a special welcome to our dual enrollment students, those of you who are at home in your school, and also those of you who got up very early to come all the way here to campus to join us in the auditorium, coping as well with the time change in addition to getting up early. So the events are that at 9:30 today here, we will have a Q&A with Mr. Betts, and then at 11 o'clock there will be a reading and also a book signing. For those of you not dual enrollment students, you've already signed up, but for our campus students, the sign-up sheets will be in a room near the front of the building, the outside doorway to the left. And when you're lining up for the sign-up sheets, if you could just snake around down the hall in a line. Please be sure to turn off your cell phones. For the Q&A, we have two faculty members who have mics. We ask you to hold up your hand for a question, and then someone will come around with a mic, and that's so Mr. Betts can not only hear your question, but also so everyone else can, and it gets picked up on the Southeastern Channel as well. So there's someone with a mic down here, and someone with a mic up here in the balcony. So I'm going to introduce first our colleague, writer-in-residence, and the current state poet laureate of Louisiana, Allison Pellegrin, who will introduce our guest poet. Ms. Pellegrin is the current state poet laureate. She also was granted a $50,000 grant from the Poet Laureate Fellowship from the Academy of American Poets. And with those funds, she has initiated a Lifelines prison poetry project in which she's facilitating poetry workshops in prisons, jails, and community centers around the state. So Allison.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hanson. Thank you to all of you for being here. Before I begin with this introduction of our distinguished guest, Reginald Dwayne Betts, I also want to offer a great thanks to the Department of Criminal Justice and Sociology. Together with the English department, we have made a whole series of events that support our study and understanding and joyful engagement with this text. You all have had speakers come on campus from all sorts of places, and we have other events coming up too. I know you've probably seen them on the screen. So be sure to thank all of your professors in all of these departments. Reginald Dwayne Betts is the author of a memoir, 3 books of poetry, including the best-selling and American Book Awards recipient Felon, which you are all familiar with, and the newly released Doggerel. You should be on the lookout for a big stack of these in the campus bookstore at some time today. He is also a performer, having transformed Felon into a solo theater show that explores the post-incarceration experience. In addition to these creative talents, Betts is also a Yale-educated lawyer and the founder and CEO of Freedom Reads, a first-of-its-kind organization working to radically transform access to literature inside of prisons. For more than 25 years, he has used his poetry and essays to explore the world of prison and the effects of violence and incarceration on American society. In 2019, Betts won the National Magazine Award in the Essays and Criticism category for his New York Times Magazine essay that chronicles his journey from prison to becoming a licensed attorney. And you may have also read his recent New York Times feature, I Teach at Harvard, Store Managers See Me as a Threat. He has been awarded a Radcliffe Fellowship from Harvard's Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Study, a Guggenheim Fellowship, an Emerson Fellow at New America, and most recently a Civil Society Fellow at Aspen. In writing on Felon, critics have said, Betts has written the 21st century book that will dictate how freedom, power, and consequence are written about until the sun says enough. It is that good. And also, Betts does nothing to protect himself or us from what he has done and suffered and witnessed. His compassion and breathtaking literary gifts make it impossible for us to look away or remain complicit in mass criminalization's status quo. So I know he's eager for the thoughtful questions you all have prepared. So let's hand this over to Reginald Dwayne Betts so we can get started. Thank you so much.
Hi. Hey, how y'all doing? I'm told this is the easy part of the day. I really just have to answer questions. But I guess I'll open and say a couple things. One, it's a pleasure to be here. It is so cold in Connecticut. And it feels good for it not to be freezing. And it feels really good for me to be able to see you guys. When I started writing, as y'all know, I was in the penitentiary. And I was, younger than most of you are in this audience. And I was doing 9 years in prison, and poems became my way to see the world. And so I guess what I'll say by way of introduction is that when you determine how you want to see the world, you just kind of hold on to it. And you just sort of never know where to take you 5, 10, 15 years from now. When I was a student, I guess I said I would stop talking, but I'll say one more thing. I was a student, I was y'all age when I was writing some of the poems that ended up in my first collection. And I had no idea I would go to law school. I had no idea I would start an organization. And I had a full tuition academic scholarship. So I had no requirement really to excel anymore. But I think one of the duties that you have to yourself is to remember that you kind of don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring, and you prepare for tomorrow and the things that you do today. So thank y'all for reading my book. I'll answer any questions. Oh, what? Is people upstairs too? Wow. Okay. Hold on, I gotta re-prepare myself. I'm gonna drink some water or something. Let's go ahead and go with the questions. I'm ready now. And the one thing I learned about being on the stage, I got to perform on the stage on Tuesday, and I've been doing a solo show. One thing I learned, it's really humbling. I am the least important person today. This is why I can't see any of you. So when you have a microphone and you want to start talking, you just have to start talking because I cannot see you. The lights on the stage prevent me from seeing anything.
Were there any works that you did include in the poem?
Oh yeah. It was it's interesting. I should say one thing about the intro. Is this? No, I'm gonna stay right here. I wanted to move and walk around, but I think I'm gonna break something if I do. One thing in the intro, I don't think I really have much of myself. Well, that's probably not true. As writers, we hide so much of ourselves all of the time. And it's kind of a mistake for a reader to think that they really know a writer. I mean, you can know some of who I am, but to really know me, you really have to know me. And so you ask a question like, are there some things I didn't include? And those go to why a book isn't really going to tell you who I am. A book tells you who the book is. Because there were plenty of poems I didn't include. They just weren't right for it. And sometimes it was the tenor, sometimes it was the tone. Sometimes it's like, I didn't know, but I was planning on writing a book after that. And so it was a few things that didn't get included. But listening to the intro and thinking about Felon, and I know the person who did review, it was Kiese Lamone, a Mississippi cat who said that the book is that good. And I do think the book is pretty good, but what's in it is absolutely what I thought was essential. And the things that didn't make it into it ended up going into Redaction, which was a different kind of project. And some of it just wasn't good enough. And you get to see it. If you can crack my 6-digit passcode. I'm gonna try my hardest not to ask them what's going on back there. I really want to help. You know, that's the thing. My inclination is to help. And it's a lot of noise. I'm like, I'm gonna go help them out. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Is the mic on?
Hello. My question isn't necessarily related to the book, but I was gonna ask, like, based on your successes, and like, I think the best comparison would be like an athlete, like staying grounded and keeping the right mentality. When, like, for instance, you have this little taste of success, and you kind of get complacent, and you kind of just get satisfied with what you're doing. How do you stay like ambitious?
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure if ambitious is the thing that all right, so look, the cool answer is to be like, yo, ambitious is not the thing that I am or that any of us should be, right? And I do believe it's something deep about recognizing and reconciling the fact that you get to choose how you live in this world and how you bring meaning to the things you do every single day. And I think, now you said professional athletes, but everybody's not Kobe Bryant. And even Kobe Bryant is not Steph Curry. But man, Steph Curry, they thought he was gonna be out the league after his first 3 years. He had these 2 major ankle surgeries. He was undersized. All you shoot are 3-pointers, who cares about that? And what people don't know is Steph Curry had the highest field goal percentage at the rim during some of those MVP years, right? So he was going up against giants, and he was scoring at a greater clip, greater field goal percentage than other people. But it was because of the work that he put in, though. He did a whole lot of core stuff. He did a whole lot of stuff to strengthen his ankles, and he changed the way he prepared for what he wanted to do. I mean, one could say that that was ambition, but one could say that he had a real joy, a real passion, because none of that is, man, there's so many people who work just as hard as Steph did who aren't Steph Curry. And so when you say something like grounded, what I hear is me looking back at the things I've done and saying, you know, maybe more than sometimes, you know, the people I love, people who love me, definitely sometimes more than the world, I have been really committed to hearing random noises. Did y'all hear that song that just came on? No. I've been really committed to what it means to be an artist, though, right? And I've been really committed to what it means to try to figure out what it means to be alive in the world. And that has pushed me to do this thing in different kinds of ways. So I said I was a poet, and I am a poet, and I've written poetry books. But then that led me to write nonfiction essays, and writing those essays led me to have conversations with people that I wouldn't have otherwise had. Now, that led me to get published in the New York Times Magazine in different spaces, and if you look at it on the outside looking in, it looks like I was just ambitious, and I had these goals, and I was chasing these goals, when the reality is I was chasing a kind of understanding. I wrote a piece about my mom. It was Kamala Harris, Mass Incarceration and Me, and it came out in the New York Times Magazine. My mom got raped like 3 weeks after I got locked up. And I did 8.5 years in prison, and she didn't tell me. And then she told me when I came home, the first day I came home. And then we didn't talk about it again for 10 years. And then 3 years after that, we talked about it again because I asked her, could I write about it for the New York Times piece? So you see that New York Times piece and you'd be like, yo, this is a mark of ambition. This is a mark of professional trajectory. It's about Kamala Harris. And I'm like, no, this piece is about my mom. And it took me 15 years to have the temerity, the audacity, the vulnerability to ask my mom, could we talk about the most horrific day of her life, and can you trust me to write about that? And I'm sorry, that is not about ambition. It is not about success. And I think, for all of us, when we figure out what it is that we want to do and the reasons why we want to do it, that will be what allows us to chart a course that keeps us pushing when we don't have success. Because a lot of times you don't have success, And I will tell everybody, though, that you compared me to Steph Curry. At least 2 people thought that was funny. Any other questions? That was a good question.
We have a question up here now.
All right, cool.
What do you hope readers take away with them, especially those who have never been impacted by the criminal justice system?
Oh, man, name a song that tells a man what to expect after prison. Explain Occam's razor. Am I still a felon after prison? Yeah, I've coached my kids' basketball teams, man, for like 8 straight years. I've coached undefeated seasons. I've coached seasons where we've gotten 0 wins. I have helped people, take their groceries into their home. I have taught teenagers, taught poetry to teenagers, to middle school kids, to elementary school kids. I think I want people to read Felon and understand that that name, that noun, is really not definitional in any kind of way. I hope that you read the book and you recognize that all our lives are way more capacious than the words that people use to describe us. Those words are very, very limited. And I think, in terms of the cover, and you look at the cover art, you see me try to argue that what that phrase sometimes does for us is limit who we might imagine ourselves to be in the world. And so if you read the book and you know somebody is inside, I hope that it reveals the capaciousness, the capacity for all kinds of things that they have, that they've always had, that doesn't get destroyed because, they serve a time in prison. I mean, if you serve a time in prison, you are still alive. And I think that's a lot of what Felon is. And a lot of what the book does is it deals with what happens after, because people forget that after you do have this robust set of experiences that you try to create a life from.
Right, we have somebody else up here on the balcony.
Since reading Felon and reading more about your experiences and what people should experience, re-entry and stuff, reading on it, is there any particular poems or entries you wrote that was hard for you physically or mentally?
That was hard for me. Every poem is kind of challenging in its own way. And I think what I didn't say and what I meant to say in an early comment is that, like, I write poems, but every poem is not me. And every poem is not about me. Even when I use I. And now I'll contradict myself, because if you get Doggerel, I will confess that every poem in Doggerel is about me. It's the most joyous, tender, intimate, moving book I've ever written. It's great. All of those are about me. And so going towards whatever place I needed to go towards to write some of those poems, I could talk about those difficulties. But in Felon, I think the one that was hardest to write, I'll name a few. House of Unending. It was really challenging for like a technical reason. It's a crown of sonnets. And I wanted every sonnet to be funky in its own way. So I wanted to have the Shakespearean sonnet. I wanted to have the Italian joint. I wanted to have a blues sonnet. And I wanted them all. I didn't use iambic pentameter, but I followed the rhyme scheme and the structure that way. So that was really challenging. And I think Losing Her was actually a really hard poem to write. It's actually really hard for me to stand still, yo. I ain't gonna lie to you. The rest of the stage looks so inviting. You gotta understand that, like, less than a week ago, I had a whole stage to myself, and I was able to move around and like talk, and now I feel like chained to this microphone. So I'm doing a great job of not perseverating over the fact I can't move. I've only mentioned it 3 times so far. Losing Her, that joint is another poem, because it's like, how do you apologize to somebody? And how do you apologize to somebody who ain't trying to hear it, yo? Who ain't gonna hear it no more because you done something to them. That means that there's no more sorries. And writing that poem was really challenging, because it wasn't an experience that I knew intimately, but I knew that I had did something in Bastards of the Reagan era, which was, I didn't spend enough time talking about women and talking about relationships between men and women. And I didn't spend much time at all talking about black women. In fact, it was only like 2 women in the book. And so when I came to write Felon, one of the conscious things I tried to do was think about intimacy in a different way, and to think about women in a different way. And that poem, Losing Her, I like that joint. It was hard to write, though, because I had to embody somebody I'm not. I am not, I'm not somebody who, and actually I don't even want to say this, because you asked the question, so I have to answer the question per the rules of engagement. So that was a difficult poem for me to write, because I have never put my hands on a woman. And it was a poem really about domestic violence. And it's like, how do you put yourself in a position where you don't, it's more than just empathy for somebody else. You try to figure out how you have a deep awareness of how something could go down. And it is really, the trick, the lie of it all is that somehow we are supposed to believe that people love everybody that's been in prison, or that everybody that's in prison is innocent. And I think the challenges that we have with reform come fundamentally around the ways that we experience violence and that we've seen violence. And so, like, for me, writing that particular poem, I had to put myself in the body of somebody who was inflicting the kind of violence on somebody else that I find unconscionable. And you learn something in doing that. Crazy thing about it, for real, is it's literally, a friend of mine's favorite poem, but it's their favorite poem because it lets them think about somebody else in a way that they might not have ever thought about that person. And so the poem gets to become a closing of a door. And it was hard for me to write, because that means I had to imagine what it meant for somebody to shut a door on me. Now y'all gotta, because I usually curse a lot, and I've decided to stop cursing. But when I curse a lot, there's way more energy in the crowd, you know what I mean? And so, and now I feel like if I end up not making it to heaven, I am going to blame this crowd. No, seriously, because I'm gonna start cursing all of the time after this. And I'm gonna say, is it Peter that you talk to before they go let you in? Let me be like, no, you need to call Peter, because I know the only problem you have with me is my profanity. But I was in Louisiana, I was at SLU. It's SLU, right? See, y'all know where y'all at. All right, anyway, y'all got more questions?
I have a question. Before you went through the experiences that inspired you to write poems, what was your opinion on prison and the treatment of inmates?
Oh my God. Dude, I went to prison when I was 16. I had no opinion on anything. You know what I mean? I went to prison, I had an opinion on outcasts. The South got something to say. I had no real opinion on incarceration. No, that's not true. I read Makes Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. I have read this book called the autobiography of Albert Semple. It's called Racehorse. I think I seen Malcolm X, the movie. And yet, and I definitely seen Shawshank Redemption. And I've seen other movies that had scenes of prison in it, like the O.G. Bobby Johnson joint, you know what I mean, Colors, things like that, Blood In, Blood Out. I had a fair amount of knowledge about a certain landscape of what it meant to be incarcerated. But my knowledge was just about violence. It was just about brutality. But if that's what you know about a place, and if that's what you know about a people, then I think you know very, very little. And I think what I've tried to do with Felon, and what I try to do with all of my work now, is to remind myself that we were more in those cells than just violent and dangerous. We were more often than not, struggling to, be better human beings, decent human beings. And, interestingly enough, like when I was living there, that didn't hit me, because I really was just trying to survive. It's only in retrospect that I feel like I've learned something else about the experience of prison that I didn't know when I went inside, and that I didn't know when I started writing it. And, it's funny because I started laughing because I was thinking about how young I was when I went to prison, but then I had to reassess the question and think, we all know a lot about prison. We all know a lot about a certain aspect of prison, no matter how old we are. And part of what it means to be an artist, part of what it means to be alive and like attentive in the world is to question those assumptions that we've been given about who we are, about who other people are, about like that noise back there. Anyway, I knew very little actually going in. And I would say that Felon in the first book that I wrote about incarceration, I would say probably The Question of Freedom was, or Shaheed Reese's own poem was the first time I did it in poetry. But Felon was the first time that I really kind of thought about what do I know about what it means to come home from prison. And actually I'm still writing that story.
Are there any other authors or forms of literature that inspire your books or style of writing?
I like that you said style, because James Baldwin is somebody. Kiese Lamont is pretty dope. Louise Eldrick, this is the last time I read a book and I just was profoundly weeping in an entire book, yo. It's these two sisters, they live in adjacent land, and they both were married, and they were Native American, they were hunters, and one guy, he's shooting a deer, and he shoots, and the deer moves, and the kid falls from the tree, and the bullet kills the kid. And the book is called La Rose, and that night, the man who had killed his, I don't know what you call it, like nephew, him and his wife, they went to his sister's house, to her sister's house, and was like, this is your son now. Like, it was an accident, but I took your son. And like now, like he lives with y'all, yo. Oh man, shit makes me weep, man. I ain't even thinking about it. Because, I mean, like, you gotta understand, man, that he had two sisters, too. In the story, it wasn't even just the conflict, you know, just the idea of what is accountability, what do you owe somebody you love, who you hurt, anybody who you've hurt. But the book tells you that it is a legitimate cost, and that the cost that we all bear, you know, you never just bear the cost on your own. It's like, it ripples. And so that's a book, I read that about a year ago. And I guess I should name somebody else. I should name some poets. Lucille Clifton, you gotta read Lucille Clifton. Come celebrate with me. Every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Faulkner, I started my solo show with a piece from this book called If This Is a Man. So yeah, I think there's a lot of writers that I would send you towards. But honestly, the writers that have influenced me, John Edgar Wideman, I mean, the list is very, very long. Ernest Gaines, Saul Bellow. I remember when I read, in prison, I read Sophie's Choice. That's not Saul Bellow, that's somebody I didn't know. Who wrote Sophie's Choice? Yo, you gotta raise your hand when you say that, because you get extra credit for that. You know, your teacher's in here, you know. Who said that? Oh man, the teacher said that, my bad. Professor said that, so she don't get extra credit. Yeah, Styron. I read Sophie's Choice though, and then I read Confessions of Nat Turner, and so it's a wide array of things that have actually like influenced me. Different cultures, different communities, yeah. And now I read poems to people on the street, and so sometimes I'm mostly inspired by what people just, you know, on the street tell me that they read, that they into, and a lot of times it's fantasy. You know, the best conversations I've had around books sometimes have been about books that other people wouldn't think people love. Like Lord of the Rings. Things that have become famous and more popular now because there are movies about it. But imagine back in the day when you tell somebody, yo, you like Lord of the Rings? And they look at you like, yo, you read that book too? And then they start talking to you in a secret language? That's what I'm talking about. Oh, my bad, y'all won't get it. I'm gonna say this. Like the Harry Potter series. Like before they made, because I ain't read the books. So I've seen the movies though. And my sons, they don't talk to me about Harry Potter because I have not read any of the books. Imagine that world where you share book knowledge with somebody and you have a conversation with them. That's what my life has been with all of these authors.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, we have a question. We have like 3 questions over here.
Okay. We have a question up here now.
Yeah, just talk. Yeah.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, your name was
Shahid.
And, how did you, like, in the process of writing, do you have a certain process when you're writing about other people and their experiences? Do you, like, sit them down and ask questions, or do you have a certain way that works for you?
That's a really good question, and I think I want to parse it out just sort of for people who are listening, right? The question is, you know, when you're writing about other people, what is your approach? Do you sit down and interview them? Do you do research? And I think the answer to that is different based on the different kind of mediums that you're writing in. So I write for the New York Times Magazine, and I write for the New York Times, just the New York Times sort of paper, right? You write for a paper, you do talk to everybody. You know that when they do fact checking, they're going to go back and they're going to talk to everybody as well. If you're writing a memoir and it's long form, I mean, it's a process of discovery, and so you want to talk to the people that you're writing about, both to confirm your own memory against another source, but also to see if they say something about what happened that you're missing, so that you're not just coming at it from your own vantage point. And then with the poems, I mean, so often the poems just are not about me, that I am always engaged with other people when I write them. And for poetry, though, I feel like that's almost like I'm a novelist. So I don't, you know, I just talk to you as I'm talking to you now, but I wouldn't, if I was going to write a poem about you, about this moment, I wouldn't feel like I needed to reach out to you and see if, you know, I handle this in the right way. So it depends on the medium. And I would tell anybody who writes, the reason why you want to write in different mediums is because sometimes interviews take time. You know, and you gotta process after you interview the person. I mean, I had these 2 interviews with Kamala Harris, and I had to transcribe them. I had to think about them, and it took a long time for me to understand like what she was saying in a way that I could feed it into the story that I wanted to write. But when it's a poem, I kind of don't have that burden. I could just go at it.
Since publishing Felon, have your thoughts on justice, redemption, and identity evolved in any way?
Yeah, I mean, for real, I feel like we don't talk about violence enough, and I feel like we do too much demonizing the other. And yeah, I think since publishing Felon, I've just recognized that mercy and forgiveness is a pathway towards peace. I can tell you how it happened. I talked to somebody who he had got carjacked, and so I couldn't talk to my victim because I don't know his name and all this stuff. But I knew this guy, and I asked him, you know, and he a journalist, so he got it, you know. And when we sat down to talk, he was like, you know, you've been thinking about this way more than me. I mean, it was horrible. Dude carjacked me. You know what I mean? I had to get over it. But if I wouldn't have got over it, I wouldn't have been able to live the rest of my life. You know, and so sometimes there is nobody to talk to. And you have to use your imagination, if that makes sense. I mean, you know. So anyway, that one feel like it got away from me. I'm going to come back to it.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Betts. In 2016, you published an essay called Only Once I Thought About Suicide in the Yellow Law Journal. In that, you quoted your sentencing judge who said, "I'm under no illusion that sending you to prison will help, but you can get something out of it if you want." And then you went on to say that one thing that's no surprise that when you got out of it was 1.5 years of solitary confinement. And my question is that now, after all these years and your maturity and your success, I wonder if you feel, looking back on that judge's quote, if you feel like you got anything else out of prison besides that solitary confinement. If there was anything that you would credit it for, or if you feel like you got anything out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating question because I did get a 1.5 years in solitary, but I also think in that essay, you know, only once I considered suicide. I mean, I was really trying to grapple with some of the things I got out of prison. And I think about it differently now, or maybe not fully differently. I thought about it, you know, I wrote that essay as a law student at Yale. I mean, I was always well aware of the fact that, like, my origin story in some real profoundly unsettling way begins with prison. You know, I became a poet in prison. I first began to study the law in prison. I first began to understand the need, desire, the want for forgiveness in prison. So in that way, you know, I did get a lot out of my time in prison. And I got a lot out of my time in prison that I could have easily not gotten if I didn't have that quote. I mean, literally, I remember this dude saying this to me on my sentencing day. I kept what he said in my head as a reminder that I could get something out of it. So I'm not sure if my opinion of it has ever changed. But I do think that in that essay, what I was trying to grapple with is, this was a judge who said, "I'm under no illusion that sending you to prison will help you, but you could get something out of it if you want." I mean, that is a kind of truth that is terrifying. You know, I was 120 pounds when he said that to me. But I carried it in my head because it became a reminder and a challenge. What will I get out of this experience? And in fact, the first decision I made after he said that to me was to be a writer. I'm in a holding cell. I'm waiting to go back to my unit. I'm like, man, I got 9 years in prison. What am I going to be when this is over? I say, I'm going to be a writer. And I mean, and so in some ways, this question, you know, answering his question was what propelled me to where I am today, which is wow, because I actually never connected the dots in that way, you know, to like, he said this thing to me, and then I'm in a holding cell asking myself, what am I going to be when I leave prison? And I say a writer. I had never in my life, asked myself what I wanted to be. That's just not something that like 16-year-olds like ask themselves, you know? I mean, I wanted to be Michael Jordan. Really, I wanted to be Kenny Anderson. But Kenny Anderson's created an age as well as Michael Jordan, so I'm gonna say I wanted to be Michael Jordan. I said I wanted to be a writer that day in the face of what the judge said to me, and I become a writer. So.
Hello, I'm quite nervous. Have you ever felt stigmatized against since you've been in prison? And have you ever really embraced what you've been through since prison?
Yo, this is a really, what part of speech is that? Is it a preposition? Since? It's a whole lot of work that since is that's doing in that sentence. Because on one sense, it's like, you asking me after prison, have I like accepted and confronted and embraced as I am now, like all of the things I've gone through, and the answer, quite honestly, is no, because like who does that? I mean, you have to have like really healthy human being, and it takes a whole lot of work. And so maybe I'm working on that part now, to fully accepting myself. And hey, I shouldn't even say this. They left a few minutes ago, and I was like, man, people hate me. And I was like, the whole audience left? It was only 3 people, and I had to like fight my brain to be like, they might be going to the bathroom, dude. They might have another class. Why are you obsessed with them? That's my struggle. It's to quiet the noise in my brain, And the noise in my brain has gotten exacerbated from putting a pistol in somebody's face. Because the sense that I'm not worthy, even of the people in this room right now listening to me, is pervasive. I mean, it prevents me from fully accepting any of the successes that I have. And actually, maybe this is how we loop back to the question of ambition, because I have been successful not trying to be successful, but trying to be worthy of care. And so it gets translated by some people into ambition. And maybe in my life, it's gotten translated into a kind of success because I have wholeheartedly worked a lot at doing the things that I do. And then your other question was about stigma. And so, have I accepted who I am and all that I've gone through? No. I'm getting better at answering questions directly. So the answer is no, but I am working on it. And thank you for making me reflect on it for a second. And the first question, stigma, whatever. Stigma is stigma. I mean, I almost got arrested, 2 days before my birthday last year. Yeah, I know they said that I looked like I was about to steal a bike. Then they said it looked like I was a vagrant and I was about to defecate behind their shop. And I ain't gonna lie to you, I was dressed like this. And I look like a lot of things, but I do not look like somebody that is about to defecate behind a bike shop. And then when they came behind the store, started yelling, like, you gotta go. I was like, look, I'm just about, no, you look nothing. Talk to the police, huh? The police? I'm about to buy, stop. And they called the police on me. I'm in a bike shop when the police show up. Because I had walked to my car because they told me I had to leave, right? I was behind the bike shop because I was smoking. I was smoking, actually. Marijuana, I'm no longer alive. That was and so I said, look. So I walked back to my car, and when my homie was like, don't spend your money with those racists. And I was like, I'm gonna call you back. And I took my coat off, and I finished smoking my J, and I walked back into the bike store. Because one thing I do get to be is forgiveness. I get to forgive him for not treating me the way that he was supposed to treat me, and I got the chance, to look at him and say, I believe you are better than what happened 5 minutes ago. And I bought me a bike, and then I wrote a piece about it that ended up in the New York Times. But what's interesting is I called one of my homies in prison. I say, this is what happened. I go to the bike shop. I'm smoking the J around back, and they come out, and I tell them, I'm trying to tell them, I'm going to finish smoking, then I'm going to buy a bike.
And he started yelling at me. And I said, what do you think I should do? My homie said, you never buy nothing from them. My homie in prison for life. How can you be in prison for life and embrace vengeance? And so have I confronted stigma all the time. I got 3 felonies, I smoke weed, I'm recently divorced, and I curse a lot. My entire life is a stigma. But to recognize that does not mean that I have to stigmatize the people who look at me like I'm less worthy of attention, of support, of respect, right? I don't have to treat them the way I feel like they treat me, because sometimes they are treating me the way they treat me, and it's not racist. It's because somebody they love is dead. It's because their son is in prison. It's because their cousin got murdered. It's because they got somebody that been raped in their family. And I think that what my life has taught me is that we all have a responsibility to do more than just feel like we should be fueled by grievances. My life is not fueled by grievances, even though I went to prison as a 16-year-old, because I went to prison because I picked up a pistol and carjacked somebody. And I refuse to live a life fueled by grievances and try to climb on, like say, oh, it's racism that did everything to me that makes me suffer at night. No. So I have experienced a profound amount of stigmatization because of how I am in the world, because of how I dress, because of how I talk, because of the number of rings that I wear on my fingers, none of which cost a lot of money, actually. You know what I mean? It's just that they are beautiful to me. But the real question for everybody, if you're a college student, you accumulate all of this knowledge, you spend all of this time studying, does it give you the ability to help somebody else in your world suffer less? Particularly somebody in your world who doesn't have an opportunity to sit in a lecture hall like this, right? And I think if you do that, stigma aside, you will find some meaningful work to do.
Hi, what is your writing process as an artist? Do you have a certain mindset or place that helps you write when you're writing?
Yo, I love y'all, yo. I was all profoundly emotional and vulnerable. It's just like, yo, let me take you back to some brass tacks, yo. Let me talk about your writing process. Unfortunately, I asked Lucille Clifton this one day, and she was like, I write short poems because I had a lot of babies. And I had to write poems while feeding my babies. And so in some ways, my writing process is developed in that way, right? It's developed on the go. I write anywhere. I started to write in prison, so I could write at airports. I could write in hotels. But I love to be around people, so my process is to be around people. And it does shift depending on what I'm writing. So if I have to write something like 500-word piece, 700-word piece, and it feels like a blog, and I could go into the booth, I could go to the page and bang it out. Sometimes I do that, and I feel exhilarated doing it. Sometimes I gotta set aside time, emotional space. I know that the email even that I'm writing is gonna be heavy, so I gotta give myself some time to grapple with what I want to say before I even go to the page. I use tools. I use Scrivener. I love Scrivener. And I have editors, yo. Editors. The one thing that writing has taught me is it's okay to be wrong. I mean, if you write something and you don't revise, and when you revise, recognize your failures of logic, your failures of thought, your failures of humility. Some of us are afraid of that as writers, actually. That's why we don't grow. Because we think that we're supposed to be perfect every time we open up our mouths. Somebody had criticized a speech I gave once, and they was like, yo, yeah, you didn't seem to be as coherent as you usually are. And I was like, bro, I was trying out ideas. And the person was like, halfway through it made sense. I was like, yeah, I know, but sometimes when you're working on ideas, even when to me, it always felt cogent. It was still a first draft. And then you hit a second draft, third draft, fourth draft, and those ideas become the gel.
So those are a few things, but then I say the bit about the editors is because they taught me a lot about the mistakes that I made as a writer. They've taught me a lot about what it means to try to structure work. I honestly, like, look, who's a poet in the audience? Oh man, who's a, I'm gonna pretend like I can't see. Any short story writers? Right? Novelists? Yo, we gonna ask this question 10 years from now and everybody's gonna be a novelist. But the point is, I guess, my point is that I used to think the easiest way to complete an essay was to be able to jump around and not stay on topic and not be chronological and linear. And chronological and linear refer to two different things too, right? Chronological refers to like time and sequence, right? But linear just a straight line. Working with the editors at the time taught me how hard it is to tell a story straight and clean. How hard it is to tell a story in such a way that like you respect the reader, you respect your audience, and you're not trying to demand like mental gymnastics out of them. You're just trying to give them the goods. So anyway, my writing places have changed with time. My approaches have changed. The utensils I use have changed. But the intent has always kind of been the same, which is revise until I get it right and then try to share it with people.
Hello? Hey.
Yo, we started, I was like, yo, is that Peter? Because I haven't cursed.
So I have 3 questions, not all of them are mine.
That sounds like Peter, you know? Not all of them are mine. Wink, wink. I was like, all right, you know.
Let me start by saying, I didn't know that you meant play, right? So can you tell me a little bit about it? What was your role in the play? What was your favorite story regarding it? What it's about?
Yeah, it's a show that's about my life. And my favorite run of it, I guess, since I ain't gonna do it today, I'll do my favorite run now. It's called, all right, let me see if I can do it.
Last few lines of a love song after prison. And she says, prison killed you, my love. Killed you so dead you never hid, you're always. And those cells own you. Brown liquor own you. And there's no room to be. Unless I call police, state, upon my pistol, and set you free. And so, you know, the interesting thing about a show is I am the only person on the stage. I think there's a lot of characters. My father shows up, my kids show up, people that interview me for jobs show up, but I'm the only person on the stage. It was fun, for real. Memorizing 75 minutes worth of content. And like spending the whole time not wanting to point out weird noises and shit. Like it's wild to be on stage, you want to like do things that have nothing to do with the show. You have to stay focused. It is so exhilarating. And it at first it came out of Fella. And it came out of the book. But the show itself is a series of like stories and conversations, right? That grew from that book and aren't just contained in the book.
All right, I got one question. And that's great that you didn't ask me all 3 questions at once because you would have seen how woefully I failed at juggling. Question 2.
So this is from the guy back there. Does being a lawyer affect how you write?
No. I think being a lawyer makes you, I mean, honestly, poets, lawyers, we're the same people. Lawyers, you have to be really precise. Good lawyers, they have to be really precise. And they are trained to like think clearly about a singular objective. And the writing is meant to do the same thing. And it's actually, it hones your pen. So I don't think it's any difference, no.
But one thing, right after this question, I'm gonna go pee, don't take offense.
Yo, that's such a, Wow.
What
Thank
was
you.
the change within the times from the moment you went in to prison and the moment you got out?
Yeah, well, honestly, I mean, I went in and, it was no cell phones, bro. It's a question that nobody asked anybody. If you called them and they picked up a phone before I went to prison, nobody said, "Where are you?" Because if you picked up a phone, you were at home. You were at home. I mean, I came home to a profoundly different world where, like, the internet was I came home in a beautiful time in a way, because it was like right at that cusp where cell phones were ubiquitous, but smartphones were just coming into existence. So for me, everything I missed was profound, but part of what I missed, I got with the cell phone in my pocket, and I got the same time that everybody else got it. And I was discovering what it meant to have, like, the internet in your pocket at the same time as everybody else. And then beyond that, the things that you miss and that you didn't know that you will recognize when you come home is that the experiences that your friends have had that changed them, that colored them, that made them, mess with each other in a room, right? I didn't have those experiences. And some of those experiences help you figure out who you are. And it took me a long time to realize that that's what I was missing.
Hi. If you could go back and give your younger self advice about writing in life, what would it be?
Yo, echolocation does not work. I've been trying to do it. I have no idea where the voices be coming from, I wouldn't give myself writing advice. I would tell myself to read. Actually, I think in a real way, I got lucky because I love books, and I was in prison. I mean, never say I got lucky and then I was in prison. That's not, But somebody who was curious and who had a desire to be a writer, and I was a teenager, I just thought books were my playground. And I spent years and years and years reading and writing poems. I mean, when you see Doggerel, you'll see that the first few pages and last few pages are poems I wrote when I was a teenager in prison. But the thing was, I was writing those poems and I was taking myself seriously, but I wasn't trying to get published anywhere. And I think the advice I would give, any young person, any young writer, is read. You will discover the craft books on your own. You will discover the craft articles on your own. I could still make suggestions of those, but the main thing is to read and to write without an intention of being published. But to write because you're trying to figure out the world. And if you do that, then you will end up being published. Even when when you write and you send out the magazines and stuff, you still, you are writing with the intent to understand the world. Somebody said to me once, "So do you revise poems after they've been published in books?" Because I just heard you read that poem, it sounded a little bit different. Of course I revise poems after they've been published in books. Walt Whitman wrote the same book for his entire life. I have permission to revise a poem until it is finished. And I think I would tell a young person that, don't think about publication as your destination. Think about a real internal sense of understanding of what you want to communicate as your destination, and that will drive you.
Howdy. If you hadn't been incarcerated, do you think you still would push yourself to have a successful life like you do now?
No. Nah, I think, honestly, I think I ain't believe in myself enough as a teenager to push myself, and I didn't come up in the circumstances where, I had a community around me that was going to make sure that I was put in the places that would have given me opportunities. So, outside of prison, unfortunately, I don't think I end up in many places.
So you use legal language and documents in many of your poems. How did you develop that approach, and what do you hope it conveys to the readers?
One of the other things I do in the show is a professor said to me, law school is a place where poets go to die. Right, I didn't think it was funny. You know what I mean? Everybody else did. I told dude I was a poet. I got like 3 free meals. Every time he sees me, he's like, yo, can I take you to lunch? I'm sorry I said that to you. But I think him saying that made me think about how I could include what I was learning in the law. And it pushed me to make it not be in conflict. So you ask a dozen writers if it's a difference between being a poet and a lawyer. Most of them probably would say it is. But for me, the reason why I say it wasn't, the reason why I answered that earlier question in the way I did, is because this professor said to me, law school is a place where poets go to die. And him saying that like forced me to think, how can I live in this place? And interestingly, it made me ask myself, how can I not compartmentalize my being? You know, like true freedom is not to have to mask who you are in whatever room you walk into. And if I wanted to be free as a poet, I was like, how can I incorporate the language of the law into the very poems that I'm writing? How can I incorporate the very body of the law into the critique I might be making about the law? And so that's what led me to do it. And I think actually, I think it came out pretty cool. I think that's one of the pieces that I do on my show. And actually, I think in that case, redacting what was superfluous actually does allow music to come out. And it allows the lawsuit to make more sense also. Because frankly, a lawsuit is like the judge is trying to deal with a legal question. But in me turning those lawsuits into poems, I was able to raise the stakes and make it not just a legal question, but a moral question. And I was able to do it using the same language and structure of the law. The same language and structure I've used to get people out of prison, I was able to use to write a poem.
Hi. I noticed in Felon, every time you spelled God, you spelled it G-E. Why is that?
Yo, you never know when Peter is in the room. Yo, I mean, for somebody who is my way of trying to show some respect and humility in the face of something that seems incomprehensible. I mean, it's just a small thing, and and it's a thing that like as a writer, you will do a lot of things that will never be communicated well to the people who read your work. But what I do in that dash is to invite myself to think about all of the things I don't know about the world. That's what that dash represents.
Hi.
My friend up here really has a question, right? And somebody got to bring the mic.
Yeah.
No, after this one, I'm not cutting you off. And I don't even know where you are, but go ahead.
Right here.
Oh, sweet, thank you.
Hi. So I know you mentioned earlier about poetry kind of being your tool to understand the world and like sort through your thoughts. I know a lot of people in the audience, probably also including me, have a lot of thoughts and kind of have trouble sorting through those. How has writing poetry helped you put things into perspective, and would you suggest others using poetry as a tool to understand the world?
That's a really good question, and I would say I do suggest others use writing poetry as a tool to work towards a different kind of understanding of the world, a better understanding themselves. But I also say I think people should read poems, because those poets will actually give you the understanding that you search for, and it gives you a way to frame what it is that you want to say when you go to the page on your own. But I definitely think that it's something that everybody should do. And the easiest way to do it, do the same thing every day, or twice a week, 3 times a week. Like study haiku, write a haiku once a week. Read a poem to somebody. Like, raise your hand if somebody has read a poem to you in the last 30 days. And it's literally like 1% of the people in a room have their hand up. Now raise your hand if you read a poem to somebody else in the last 30 days. Quite impressed, but we still at like 5% of the people in the room. And so what I would suggest you do as well to push what you're saying is to share the poems that you read to friends, and even just share it as a voice memo and then send it to somebody. You'd be quite surprised. And I mean, I met a dude that was 35 years old, said last time he heard a poem was in middle school. How starved of life. I read him a poem right then. I really do think poetry can help us think about what it means to be alive. And the reason is the writing of poems, you said your question started with, slowing down the thoughts in your head. But the writing of a poem asks you to meditate on a moment. And that's why poetry is different from, a novel, a short story, but even a 700-word essay. Because a poem asks you to give yourself permission just to think about why one moment mattered. So I would say definitely do it. It will quiet your brain, even if it doesn't make you a writer. And it might make you a writer. But do it and read poems to other people as well.
You became a lawyer after serving time in prison. What was the biggest challenge in that journey?
All of it. It was weird because that sentence it suggested it's straightforward. Like, I became a lawyer after serving time in prison. True enough, but I became a father. I became a husband. I became a man in the world that was really struggling to provide for his family. I had gotten a professional degree, and that degree didn't lead to the job opportunities that I desired. And then I committed to go to law school because I figured that would lead to some job opportunities. And so all of those things were like huge challenges. And then I said, I'm going to law school. What law school would you go to? And man, I had been studying for the LSAT, and I had been studying for a minute. And my ex says to me, yo, you need to take it under real test conditions, though. You up here sipping bourbon at night, answering questions with your feet on the sofa, you know what I mean? Finishing a test in like 6 days that's supposed to take 5 hours. See what your score is if you do it under test conditions. And I had did it that one time under test conditions. My God. I went from genius to like the lowest score possible. My score was so low, I couldn't even understand how I scored that low. And so, what does it mean to go from prison to becoming a lawyer? I mean, honestly, it meant confronting. I was like a 33-year-old dude, 2 kids, struggling. And that journey meant I had to learn how to discipline myself, study, learn things new. I mean, I canceled my first test. I didn't even take the first test after I failed on that practice test. And then I took like 3, 5-section, 4-hour courses a week for the next 3 months. So by the time I got to law school, and then I did all of this because I bet on me. I told my wife, though, I'm gonna get into Harvard Law. We should stay here in Boston because I'm gonna get into Harvard. And so when you think about the journey from like prison to law school, people think about it if they don't understand the details. My desire to be a lawyer was my desire to take care of my family. And then when I actually looked at what the test was, the journey became like figuring out how to do well on a test that I was woefully unprepared to do well on. And then you get into law school, and you're like, wow, I got into some of the best schools in this country, and I just thought I was worthless 3 days ago. And so how do I describe that journey? And like the answer to one question, it's challenging, but that's a little glimpse of what I hope is the next book I'm writing.
All right. I finally get to ask the question because everyone keeps quickly stealing it. But I wanted to ask if you could change anything, even if it's one thing, one small thing, or something that happens all over the world, all at once. If you could change one thing about this world, what would it be?
So around this time last year, I went into a prison, and half the people called me Shaheed, half the people called me Dwayne, and I was staring at the ground, And somebody say, yo, what is Shaheed doing? And the people was like, yo, Dwayne is looking for a 4-leaf clover. Now remember, I'm in a prison. And so the dudes that know I did time, and some guys that I did time with, it was like, he ain't looking for no 4-leaf clover here. Has he lost his mind? And he's like, nah, yo, he looking for a 4-leaf clover. So people respect me, they just let it go. The warden says, yo, Mr. Betts, Attorney Betts, are you really looking for a 4-leaf clover? You think it's gonna give you luck? I said, nah, man, I am looking for one though, because I just think you find what you look for. And I think sometimes an object like a 4-leaf clover that's rare, the looking means something. And spent 5 hours in that prison. And as we walked out, I looked down at the grass, right? Saw a 4-leaf clover. It's in my bag right now. I carry it around with me. I could pull it out of my bag and show it to you. But the point is, if I could change one thing, I would figure out how to recenter what we look for. Because nobody wants to look for suffering. Or most of us, you think that if most of us had the choice, we would say, you know, what I want to chase is joy. I don't want to chase suffering. But I think that, you know, so often in life, we chase the things that cause us suffering. Whether it's bad relationships, whether it's alcohol, whether it's any number of things. And so if I could change one thing, because I do believe we found what we look for, how could the thing I would change is like reorienting what we look for towards joy. I'm recognizing that sorrow is a part of joy as well. So I'm not saying that, you know, I could make all suffering actually disappear. But I think that sometimes you find what you look for, and sometimes what we look for is suffering. All right. I'm told that was an amazing last question. Oh, no, your mic is in somebody's hand, so let me let the mic hand, because I'd be rude of me.
Would you say that a moral you tell people is to just let your life experience shape you and move on with it?
No, I would say that you got to figure it out, and you work really hard to figure it out. And I have not moved on with that noise back there. So no, I'm not suggesting anybody move on with anything. I am suggesting that you embrace it and let it all come in, even the mishaps, even the things that are inarticulate, even the things that aren't as skilled as like this question. I wish I would have let it end on the last question, but I wanted to honor you because you can't just let it go, you know. Thank you guys. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you'll be able to hear it, you know?
Yes. Mr. Betts, my name is Ann Babs, and I am a member of the faculty, and I just want to tell you how my students are responding in class through poems. At this particular moment in America, where a lot of communities feel embattled, when I talk about you, it's like I could hear a pin drop if I were to pause. What you have brought to this community right now is a message of empowerment that they did not hope to find at college. So thank you. And allow me to ask you if you wouldn't mind signing my book. My students come to this period, and I'm telling you, they feel stronger in their own lives because they've read here. So thank you so much.
Thank you for telling me that.
To kind of piggyback on that, what I'm having my students do is follow your creative pattern. So using the blackout forms. So they all went to the website that you mentioned in the back.
Yeah.
And they all found a court case, and they have created their own blackout form, created their visual image to go along with it. And
That's pretty cool.
in the present
So you over here, just when the reading starts, you paying attention halfway, just turn and you don't have to get the whole poem, the beginning, the middle. You don't have to get the whole thing.
Okay.
Just capture whatever you capture. But then when the Q&A starts, to just pay slightly more attention. And sometimes you hear a question that you like, yo, let me record him answering.
Good morning. For those of you who were at the 9:30 event, welcome back. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome to the Common Read with Reginald Dwayne Betts. Sponsored by the Department of English and World Languages, the Southeastern Writing Center, and the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. We welcome all of you here at the Powell Auditorium. Welcome also to our dual enrollment students who have traveled here for the event on campus, and also those of you who are streaming the events in your classrooms. We want to thank the Southeastern Writing Center, the staff, the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, Dr. Jeff White, our Dean, the staff of the Department of English and World Languages, the Southeastern Channel for streaming these events, the staff here at Powell Auditorium, and also thank you to you students for your interest and your engagement with Mr. Betts' poetry. Welcome to dual enrollment students who have traveled a long way to get here and got up early to do so. This part of the program is reading. Mr. Betts will be doing readings from his poetry. After the event, for those of you who need a sign-up sheet, those will be in a small room, which are off to the left as you go out the door. And then for the book signing after the event, we're setting that up, I believe, outside. So it'll be nice and warm in the sunshine to get an autograph for your copies. I'm going to introduce our speaker, our colleague, and writer in residence and the current poet laureate of the state of Louisiana, Allison Pellegrin. Ms. Pellegrin, in her role as state poet laureate, was awarded a $50,000 grant from the Poet Laureate Fellowship of the Academy of American Poets to initiate what she's called the Lifelines Prison Poetry Project, in which she's facilitating poetry workshops in prison, jails, and communities. Allison Pellegrin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hanson. And before I begin with this introduction, I also want to point out
that the Department of English and World Languages has worked together with the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice to set up a speaker series to help students engage with all of the different material that Felon has brought us to discuss. We've already had people from the Parole Project on campus, as well as the Justice Initiative, and on March 20th, there will be a screening of the film Sing Sing, and then later in April, Poetic Soul Johnson will be coming to do a poetry workshop and to talk about the work she has done writing poetry with incarcerated juveniles. Reginald Dwayne Betts is the author of a memoir, 3 books of poetry, including the best-selling and American Book Award recipient Felon, as well as the newly released Doggerel. During the last event, I got a text from the bookstore informing me that they have just received these books off the truck, so please go buy yours before they run out. He is also a performer, having transformed Felon into a solo theater show that explores the post-incarceration experience. In addition to these creative talents, Betts is also a Yale-educated lawyer and the founder of and CEO of Freedom Reads, a first-of-its-kind organization working to radically transform access to literature in prisons. For more than 20 years, Betts has used his poetry and essays to explore the world of prison and the effects of violence and incarceration on American society. In 2019, Betts won the National Magazine Award in the Essays and Criticism category for his New York Times Magazine essay that chronicles his journey from prison to becoming a licensed attorney. In a world of so many differences, Betts reminds us that the central thing I believe in is that poetry matters. And that must be the reason that I feel like a preacher when I stand before a class talking about poetry. It has been amazing to witness students uncover the buku range of Betts in this collection, how he sings through moments of regret that anchor all of us in this life, how he holds on to memories like they are archives, redacting all but the essence, so that what remains is a sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes joyful testimony to the wreckage all around us as we move through the world. Settle in, quiet your phones, and quiet your mouths, please, because we are about to be taken to church. Please join me in welcoming Southeastern Spring 2025 Common Read author, Reginald Dwayne Betts.
Thank you, that was beautiful. All right, this is gonna be fun. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read some poems and see how this goes. Somebody in the audience mentioned this, so I'm gonna start with this one. And what I'm gonna do, I guess, I did this solo show, and I did it last week, and it's 75 minutes. And it was predicated in a lot of ways on the poems in Felon. But they've been revised. And so I think what I'll do is I'll do some of them from memory and then from heart, and I'll read from Doggerel, and then we'll have a conversation. But you'll notice some of these have been revised. And actually what I'll do is I'll do some of them in the sort of, in a way that it happens in the show. So you'll see like a section of the show. And when I'm doing it, I'll kind of tell you so that you know. And you laugh, if it's funny. So this one I'm gonna do 2 poems. And the first one is Blood History. And then the second one is like a response. So, Blood History. Some things get remembered different. Precise as this English tongue can be, with words like perseverate, and petrichor. Ain't no exact sequence of letters to describe this leaving. Once, in a cell we shared, Juvie asked if I longed for a father. Had he said wanted, I would have dismissed him in the way that youngins dismiss it all. A shrug, sarcasm, sharp jab to the stomach, laughter. But he said longing. And in a different place, I might have wept. Said once my father lived with us and then he didn't. And it messed me up so bad I didn't think about his leaving until I held my firstborn in my arms and only now speak on it. Said once a man who drank whiskey and wild Irish rose like water told a circle of black boys that there is no word for father where he comes from. Not like we know. There, the word for father is the same as the word for listen. The blunts we passed around let us abandon our tongues. Not that much though. But what if the liquor ain't lie? And if you have no father, you can't see straight. Years later, mine said to me, son, why your firstborn ain't got our name? As if he ain't know. Some things turn your life into a prayer. The gods will certainly answer. Son, no letters distinguish your name from mine. No signal for the mailman, the postman, your employee. Though the man before them is me and not whatever followed you after prison. I ain't no goldfinch. We a kind of crow, a murder of us looming. The internet say our story is a song of tragedy and regret. Dozens of men with variations of our name, fragments and broken glass, evidence of being called before a judge for everything, from domestic violence to traffic tickets to something called jury trial prayer. And all you did to land you in those cells. And there is no way to distinguish us. A birth date, a social security, the wings that you tatted on your back, you desecrated your body. All right, those are two. And the weird thing about and this is the challenge I'm gonna have, right? Because in the show, when I end with you desecrated your body, then what happens is I turn around and I walk. Name a song that tells a man what to expect after prison. Explains Occam's razor. Am I still a father after prison? But the interesting thing is at a poetry reading, you gotta have a way to signal to the audience when the poem is done. And I'm like, how do you do that? But the beautiful thing here is that I know exactly what poems I'm gonna read, and I'm gonna run you through some of these poems. And it's cool because I haven't read some of these in a long time. All right, night. In the night asleep, her eyes, woman, my woman, I name her as if she is mine. As if these hours that pass for the night belong to us. My nights belong to the memories I can't shake. My night in this woman, my woman, she tells me how it wasn't supposed to be like this. This incite another Hail Mary, another haymaker. We live somewhere between almost there and not enough. Almost there. Her dreams and all that she lost for me is a kind of accounting. My woman, not this night, not these nights. The mine is less mine, more hurt, more hover than anything else. Shadow cloud, or as she says it, you stalked me until I submitted. Love shapes itself into my hands wrapped around her throat. Have you loved like that? I'll call your PO. It's the thing she says on this night with the men I robbed still lingering. A threat to the freedom I imagined she gave when we became cliche, naked, tangled. This is always about me. How violence called to me like my woman moans when she thought all this was the promise of more than a funeral. When I grabbed her like that the first time, her legs held me tight. My woman thinking the cells in my past could make her control this. All the ways I starve. She threatens to call my history back as a constraint or madness. She stared at me once and said she saw her brothers during life in my eyes. And this night, when we talk to each other, it is in shouts. The quilt of solitary cells I've known confess that my woman has never been my woman. How ownership and what made me split that bastard's head into a scream is what I'll never admit to her. When she tells me, prison killed you, my love. Killed you so dead that you're not here now. You're never here, you're always. Her eyes closed at night, and I awaken and swear she stares at me. She is saying brown liquor owns me, saying that the cells own me, and that there is no room for her unless she calls the police, the state, calls upon her pistol, and sets me free. Whiskey for breakfast. My ex-lover don't believe in my sadness. She say whiskey and not time left me wrecked after prison. And she might be right. My liver awash in all but the dregs of a charred oak cask. Soaked in barley's amber, shadow as blood, dim as a cell in a hole. Survive brackish prison water only to become collateral. The things that haunt you still drown now, friends tell me. And nearly 50 pounds of brick hue colored rock gut, Spiritus frumenti. A gallon of whiskey weighs 8 pounds. And I am river. And all this becomes a man confessing. Dear warden, my time been served. Let me go. You promised some of this I wouldn't recollect after prison. All right, so I shall read a few more from here, and then I'm gonna switch up to doggerel, and then I'll invite y'all to talk to me, and me to answer questions, and me to read more poems. Triptych. But for is always game. But for is always game. A man can be murdered twice, but for science. His body, a pool of blood in Baltimore and Tulsa, except it isn't. His body actually slender against the sunlight just outside a California prison. A crow rests on a fence near his car. Visiting hours long done for man, not crow. One of a murderous many that flies above this barbed wire. And a cigarette he smokes is illegal here. And but for the magnetic pull tragedy has on black women, he wouldn't be here right now. Contemplating the crimson-colored man leaping into the darkness on his J's. He still says Air Jordans because air is important. Swearing to black America's aim, if not ability, to soar. A way to outrun statistics and a lead in the water. Alas, metaphysics says you are only you and no one else. And a black poet says black love is not 1 or 1,000 things, and it all may be true, but for the fact that the man swears the crow looks at him dead as if he is already so. As if while standing there, he has been murdered by his brother, murdered by a cop, embodied by a prison sentence as flames from a Newport's burning ash fail to illuminate his shadow. I'm gonna read another poem that I just, it is an allusion to Nikki Giovanni in that poem. And I just realized reading it that I have wrote a poem in doggerel. So the thing about Felon actually is if you would have asked me about it just after it came out, if you would have asked me about it at a lot of different points in my life, I would have said that I would not have said how much more joy I wish it had. And now when I read it, I find that it's beautiful, man, and I just am happy that the book is a part of a trajectory, and I am happy that everybody who reads it sees themselves in it, because the book reminds me of what happens next. And any good book, any good poem is not about just what it says, but what it says next. And so you got that one triptych, which is some funny, I stopped cursing because Peter might be in the audience and I am going to make it to heaven. If I don't, it's not going to be because of profanity in public. But the last poem, that was a joke, man. Ain't anybody laughing, yo. So y'all should feel pleasantly encouraged to emote in whatever way you desire. As long as it doesn't conflict with people's ability to hear me, you can laugh, you can say, wow, you could be incredulous, but please don't feel like you have to sit there quiet. And so it's funny, the last poem is called Triptych, because triptych means 3. And I'm gonna read you 2 poems that are beautiful companions to that one. That poem is about a man who is me. I was the one in a California prison. And I had just left the prison meeting with a group of juvenile lifers who thought they would die in prison. And that's the poem I wrote. But that's not the poem I lived, because the poem I lived became, how do you get somebody out of prison? How do you begin to embody forgiveness, to embody mercy? How do you begin to embody the fact that you are breathing as long as you are breathing? And so these are 2 poems that's in the new book that wildly are a response to that. For some things there may be forgiveness still. When my mother asks after my heart, she senses more than knows this weeping, and call it coincidence or maybe finally an admission. Years lost to prison, no, years lost because I pulled a pistol on strangers, became a chasm we might tumble into, and then she stumbles again. Watching me occupy space for more days since back when I was her teenager, as if I vanished and never returned. And now my sons approach my disappearing age. And I wonder what to name this thing that's held us together all these years. Maybe it is like crows and how they've turned murder into a paradox, a way to announce never being alone. Such wild juxtaposition. Hundreds of cawing black birds named after death, testifying to life in wild and raucous flight. arriving late. The only one on time was the dash-on, doing what Richard Pryor would have called low running, away from the airplane that felt like a cage to him. Shaheed has known prison cells to feel like a cage and has remembered his name in returning to what the small dog would escape. The sniffing dash-on became a reminder that sometimes freedom means noticing what others miss. My mother stood beside me and we were at an airport the day before Mother's Day. God knows the second Sundays of May I've spent in cells. And I should have known being with her on this one was all the joy I needed. Our missed flight had become a chance to lose ourselves in a despair of missed connections and layovers. Ellsworth, behind his ticket counter, but from an island as lovely as my mother, said, I would have saved you two that missed flight. But then what of the moments that followed? When my mother saw me in public dancing with strangers, if to dance is to test our words. In an Algerian dialect, Desara means roughly trying hard to befriend a stranger with words. And this is why I confessed to the bartender. My ring finger now is burned as a prison cell when I left it for good. My God, the prayers answered by leaving. May God forgive us for not knowing that we have always been enough for ourselves and definitely for the small dogs who appreciate the chance silence gives to notice what's been missed. I'm gonna read a few more from Felon and then I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna look at my clock. I'm gonna read a few more from, oh, wow. I'm gonna read one more from Felon, and then I'm gonna read a couple more from Doggerel, and then I'm gonna open it up for questions. All right, yo, I'm gonna tell the story. If absence was the source of silence, some things my sons would never hear. Not for my reluctance to speak or the thief that has silenced his mother's tongue, his grandmother's tongue, turned to stare at a woman who, when it's far too early for the sun to be out, sees me turn a corner with a Newport. The sky and the ground is dark as the fear, and yesterday she swallows as she crosses into a might as well be oncoming traffic, remembering a man from her past. Stories my sons would not know, not because of a need to hide history. Those bedrooms and ballrooms and work where trust became carnage. No, these things will be Pandora's box untouched, and yet they will know. Because it's what I must tell my sons about what their hands might do, and long conversations about what the hands of men do, about my own hands. When I was 12, a friend told me of men offering her money for her slender and young body. She no older than me then. Arms not strong enough to carry her own weight, let alone push her past the men who wanted to own what is hers. Hers just the first of a story that would keep returning. The numbered hurt, rape, its aftermath, and this account of trauma my boys would never know if the world differed. If war did not mean soldiers demanding the body of a woman as land to plunder. I keep trying to turn this into sense. For me, my sons would hear a story about how hands like theirs, like mine, made something wretched of the memories of women we love or don't know at all. This is true, and there is a map to take us to all that hurt. some silent saying it all. But let's say the world is ours. On that day, all the silenced tongues will have speak without fear of being doubted. Of the cars and hellos that became dungeons. Of friends who became the darkness that drowns all until only rage and sadness remain. And maybe after we can build memory that does not demand silence. All the things that happen now as if a part of being would not be, and my sons' lives would be carved out of days in which their hands and bodies do not suggest weapons. Days where all their mothers and sisters can walk down any street in this world with the freedom that comes from knowing you will be safe after dusk or during those moments just before dawn. Unlike today and yesterday and now, when the quiet and what might ruin is the threat that circles. All right, so what happened was I was in law school and one of my classmates was like, will you contribute a poem to the Feminist Utopia Project? And I was like, why are you asking me to contribute a poem to the Feminist Utopia Project? And she taught me something. Sometimes people see you in a way that you don't see yourself. And sometimes you just say yes, because the invitation is an opportunity for you to become something that you hadn't been before the invitation. And so I wrote that poem, and I hadn't read this poem in years, right? And the 12-year-old girl that I was talking about is now my girlfriend. And I never forgot that story that she told me. And we haven't, we weren't close. I mean, we were friends, but because we had things going on in our life, it was just a story from my childhood that made it into the poem. Now, she did the cover, though. Now we back together, and she did the cover for Doggerel. And it's a kind of beautiful symmetry in that, yeah. All right, so I'm gonna read a few more poems from here, and I'll open it up for questions. And this is joyous. Those were cool too, actually. And I will not read anything that's not safe for work, but this has some not safe for work poems. Bike ride. I've taken to riding bikes. I've lost 60 pounds, actually. I'm gonna read losing weight too. But I've taken to riding bikes everywhere. And I lost 60 pounds, and this whole book sort of came out of a trip I was in Italy. And at first I couldn't ride at all. And so this is a poem out of that experience. It's for my son, Makai. Bike ride. Returning from a gravel path, I ride a bike with my oldest boy. And this is where he learns how the body fails you. Each time I pause, he asks if I'm okay, and I say yes, and climb back on the bike as if I believe I won't falter again. I know I will. The ride no more than 2 miles along an Italian road, but so much more than my body can take these days. We've been searching for a haunted house, and I should admit that my son don't like birds. But when I found this abandoned church and hundreds of wings turned it into a scene from Hitchcock, I wanted to share that mixture of joy and fear I felt. I imagine he knew. Mostly, I wanted to be close to him in a way that my father has never been to me. Biking to that old church, we were interlopers and discovered barking that wanted us to take leave. Particularly the Gandalf looking like little mud in our path. Makai would have tangled with the beast to save me, I know. As we ride and I stop and he asks if I'm okay. I don't know what it means for a child to see his father weep, but know what it means to be saved by a son. And you know what? I've been ending on this and I'll take questions, right? Guns, dogs, and heroin. Now what happened was there was a mistake made with that last poem I read in my last galley. They made a mistake. And so I revised this poem to fix the mistake, and I revised it to be a poem that I owed somebody that I said I would write, for them, right? And again, it's the beauty of revision, and it's the beauty of looking at a thing again, because I thought the book was finished. And this is the 25th hour. And I get the galley and I notice the mistake. And then instead of just telling them to fix the mistake, I revised the whole poem. And so this poem that I'm about to read would not have happened if not for somebody making a mistake. But, you know, we get to choose how we respond to the mistakes of others, yo. And those mistakes can be small or profound. And in this case, it was just like she added or he added a piece of a poem that didn't belong. Just take it out. But my response to it, though, was like to see it as an opportunity. And if it's one lesson in writing, is that, yo, you can see people's mistakes and your own mistakes as opportunities to become better, to become different. So I'll read this poem and then I'll open it up for questions. I love the title, too. Guns, dogs, and heroin, but not gin. Not because of judgment or how some seduction reduces us all to a mistress of common sense, but because the smell of gin ain't funky enough. Not the guttural need that follows any get down or birthday. You know, one of them walking in the rain funky days. Though not for the sadness, but for the joy of more. And the calling above says this world notices something other than me. And then boom, I'm back on the Pettus Bridge, barefoot, in another downpour. On the other side, a woman I just met waits to return me to near memorial that stretches across so many acres of green, with its 800 giant Corton monuments falling from the sky. Surnames, if known, of a black person lynched in these United States, carved in the steel. All for this legacy of survival we carry with our breath, and the 2 blue ribbons tatted behind this woman's ear, the J's with a dragon leaping from the tongue on her arm, and her waiting as I walk chaotic across a bridge on a day that would have been Rosa Parks' 111th birthday, testify to all the ways we come to know each other. And as I turn to see the deadly, I stared down a fall that will foreshorten the life of a falling God. And I remember Bloody Sunday, how back then, even facing snarling, they'd held fast to their Sunday mornings. And maybe this is what the older couple remembers. The 2 I turn and see walking just a pace behind what I've become. A man barefoot and weeping in the rain. And they step without talking, but there as if to tell me as I walk that today, a day of raindrops, August, whatever men lost at sea desire when they fear drowning. All right, now before you guys have to run and do your next thing, I hope you get to get some food, but let's answer a few questions before you disappear. Oh, wow. There's a lot of people here. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. It's actually one of the first times I've read a lot of those poems in public, particularly that last one.
This event is still going on. Can you all please be quiet? Thank you.
I'm more personal though. Do you think that prison sort of saved you in the way, as you reflect back on where you are now, compared to where you were at 16?
I mean, you know, I think, and this is the part of what I meant by saying, you could take a mistake as an opportunity. You could take a ruined decision as an opportunity. And I think one of the things that I have always been troubled by that question is like, no, prison didn't save me, but the love of men that I met in prison saved me. The love of my mom saved me. You know, my desire to build something of a life other than being ashamed of what I did saved me. But prison as a geographical location where I spent my formative years, that even in itself was never the thing that saved me. You know, a judge telling me I'm under no illusion that sending you to prison will help you. I mean, that saved me. Because it gave me something to carry around in my head to remind me that I had some ownership. He said, but you could get something out of it if you choose. Which I thought was absurd, to tell a 16-year-old kid that weighed 120 pounds that you could get something out of it if you choose. But then I made it my mission. So it's hard. I won't say that prison saved me. I will say that the love of a lot of people who I've named in the past and whose names I no longer remember, I say, you know, really fundamentally, my mom saved me. You know what I mean? She traveled hundreds of miles. Man, I got a degree from Yale Law School. Prison didn't make that. My mama made that. And in the face of what I did, my mama showed up for me week after week after week. And she didn't even tell me how much she suffered. She didn't tell me all of the time that I was in prison that she got raped 3 weeks after I got locked up. She said, yo, I don't believe my son should have to carry that burden on his shoulders while trying to survive prison. No, prison didn't save me. My mama saved me. You know, it's weird when you answer a question and be like, yo, are you mad at her for asking you the question? What did she do? You know, it's funny though, because like sometimes you realize something in a moment that you never thought about before. I have never said that in public. My mom saved me, not prison, yo. And to imagine that you could love somebody enough that it will save them. I mean, that's a really humbling thing. Yeah. Oh, y'all can ask any personal questions you want. My friend here has a quote. Somebody over there has a question, and then we'll come back to you, my friend.
Would you say looking back at your past has helped shape the future or the present time now for you?
Yes, but not in ways that I understood. When I was in a room just like you guys, college student, thinking about what my future would hold, I didn't understand that my past was the thing that helped me think about how I prepared for every single day. So when I was you got to say like one thing that matters to students. So this is the one thing I'm gonna say that matters to you. I had a full tuition academic scholarship when I was in the situation you're in right now. And I already had a full tuition academic scholarship to my MFA program. I did an MFA and undergrad at the same time because I'm a fool. 2 different universities, right? Now to keep my degree, my scholarship, I just had to keep a 3.0. But I was like, I'm gonna work. So come senior year, and I transferred from community college. So come my final year, right? I still had a 3.8 GPA, something like that, right? I have no intention on doing any more school. I'm done. But I want to show up for my mama. So then I see that they got a commencement speaker. And all you got to do is have a 3.5 GPA. I was like, oh, sweet, I got that. I end up getting a chance to get a commencement speech, right? I get a commencement speech. And again, I'm thinking that I'm finished with school for the rest of my life. I thought Oprah was going to watch this speech. I thought this was going to catapult me to like I had a book coming out. You know, I had a memoir. And I was like, memoir is going to make me famous. And at least going to be able to pay my student loans back. None of those things happened. At all. But you know what did happen? 6 years later, I still couldn't get a job. And I was like, yo, what should you do? Yo, you should go to law school. And when I was in this room just like you, and I thought I was finished school, and I could have just coasted, I chose not to. And it's so interesting how obnoxious elite institutions are. No, actually any institution. Because they know when you coasted. See, you think that they don't choose you because they are discriminating against you for whatever reason. But no, they know you coasted. They know it because it's 1,000 People that's trying to get into their university, and they see when you coasted. And I didn't. And so then I said, I'm gonna go to law school. All of a sudden, I ain't got that extra B or C on my transcript that would have kept me out of Yale Law School. And that's something that, like, my past helped to shape me into, like, who I am today. I think that's a useful answer to the question. If it's not, though, just discard it.
The word in our name, Shahid, appears a lot, in our felons specifically. And I was wondering just what that means to you or in the word. Maybe.
I came home on March 4th. March 4th. I mean, it's the kind of thing a poet has to love. March 4th out into the world. I mean, I thought that I was going to leave everything about prison behind. But I did time with Christopher Tunstall, Roger Fentress, Terrell Kelly, Anthony Wynn. I mean, I did time with men who rechristened themselves wisdom, righteous, mathematics, divine. Yo, I was a kid in prison. And they said to me, actually, we were all teenagers in prison. And they said to me, who do you want to be? As if a name alone could transform us from whatever landed us in those cells to something that mattered. They give me this baby book. And it's like I'm a father naming my firstborn. A's, Adam. Nah, it's a lot of biblical challenges with that name. B's, C's, D's, E's, F, G's. And then it hit me. Yo, I could be like Prince. Like, literally, what if I could just have one name? And so I'm searching through the book. I get the S's and I find the name Shahid. It means the witness. What kind of fool am I to carry a name like that for 8.5 years? And imagine that I would turn the first corner without remembering where I've been. And so the name, it shows up constantly, even in Doggerel, a book that's suffused with joy. I'm talking about so far, now this is going to be challenged today, and not by you guys, I want you to know, I'm not blaming you. So far, every time I read a single poem from this book, the person who heard the poem has bought a copy or two. Now I've been told that the booksellers have copies here, but they do not have 500. So I know it's in your heart to buy copies, but you might not, right? But when you read Doggerel, you'll see Shahid comes up often. You'll be like, oh, what does that mean? And it's me signing my own name. It's me remembering something about where I come from, but doing it in such a way that I'm reminded that, like, even as you pass through a kind of suffering, even as you pass through a kind of sorrow to a kind of joy, you don't have to discard the things that happened before. And so that's the name, and that's where it comes from, and that's kind of, you know. Yo, one time I was at this university, I swear, they didn't tell me that I didn't have to answer every question. They had 2 microphones set up, one here, one here. I answered questions for 4.5 hours. I answered every question. And then they said to me, yo, it was so great of you to answer all their questions. And I was like, you could be invited as a guest somewhere and tell somebody that you're not going to answer that question? It's like, who does that? And then they started naming all of the professional poets that I know and love who are so mean, you know?
How vital was poetry in your healing process?
I am on a healing process. And yo, I'm gonna answer that question in a different way. Because honestly, like healing for yourself, it's all kinds of things that you do to heal for yourself, but it's actually hard to think about. Like for me, poetry is healing for myself because I am good. And I am a professional, and it is my job, and it is not just about me. So when I go to the page and I'm writing poems, I have to be aware of the fact that this ain't just about me. If I'm trying to heal myself, I gotta go to therapy. I gotta go meditate. I gotta eat. Man, I haven't eaten today. What time is it? Yo, I gotta make better life choices. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna put all of that on a poem, but let me tell you this question though, man. 2019, a friend of mine says, I got colorectal cancer. And I said, you know, I'm gonna write you a poem. Every time you gotta go to chemo, you're gonna have a poem from me before or right after. Yeah, I think about it, man, like, I didn't even know her that well. Her name's Amy Lowe. And the duty to sing to somebody who was suffering demanded of me more than sorrow. And so I found a way in poems, man, and it was always in revision. Because our first impulse is always the brutal one. It is always the unforgiving one. It is always the mean-spirited one. That is the impulse because we're human. And I'm writing these poems for somebody who got colorectal cancer. And man, suddenly, man, I just cared about the world in a different way. And I began to realize, yo, audience does matter. Believing that what you say to somebody and how it lessens their suffering matters. And we live in a country, we live in a society, we live in a world that does not believe that that is the one thing that each of us can control. It's like, yo, if I say something to you, I can ease your suffering or can increase it. Now you asked about my healing journey. The poetry has helped me understand that it could be a vehicle for somebody else's life, yo. One time, and then I'll stop. I had met this dude 2 minutes before, 5 minutes before. We don't know each other. I come back into the dressing room. He's on the phone with a friend of his. I'm so sorry your dog died. Yo, yeah, I had 2 dogs like that too. They beautiful. I said, yo, put it on speaker. I said, yo, yeah, put it on speaker. I'm gonna do something. Yo, this guy's asking me to put it. I don't understand what he wants. This is crazy. He puts the phone on speaker. I read him a poem out of Dog Room. This poem called Grief that I wrote for a friend of mine whose dog had passed. And the dude gasped at the end of my reading, right? And then I just left and I thanked them for letting me read to him. I mean, me recognizing that I can say something that might decrease the suffering that one person experiences is what poetry has done for me to imagine healing, right? But that's more about me in the world. Me personally, it is a long and arduous process that poetry is just like, one element of it. I wish we were recording this. I said some good stuff, I just, for real.
We got you. Maybe one more.
Cool, I want to say too, I haven't cursed. I mean, I know I keep harping on this, but people tell me I curse all the time. I gotta say, one of the gifts I got in prison, my homies. See, the thing is, people out here think that they telling me how I should live my life and what I should do. And I got plenty of advice from people in prison a long, long time ago. So I know I can stop cursing whenever I want. Because there was a time in my life where I cursed so often and my homies was like, yo, Shaheed, you curse too much. I don't curse too much. Yes, you do. Man, listen, I can stop whenever I want. 25 push-ups for every curse word. And then these dudes collaborated against me. I would be talking to you. 3 sentences later, somebody in the back, yo, Shaheed, that's 500 push-ups. Huh? Oh, I got these though. And and now I could go without cursing. So, last question.
So, with going from Falcon to Dog World, what would you say is like the change or your mission statement for these books?
I swear, these last questions be so good that it be feeling like I planted them there, And one of the beautiful things that you just said, see, because we don't think about poetry and poets as having mission statements. Like we don't think about like the job, the duty, what I am here for. It's not just to sell books, because I don't even care about that. I mean, I do. Like I said, y'all should buy a lot of books. But it is to articulate a reason for why the work exists in the world. And if you ask me what my change was, is that I wrote Felon and I wrote all of the other books, and I actually didn't know. When I wrote A Question of Freedom, That's the memoir I wrote, came out in like 2009. I wrote Shaheed Reads His Own Poem, came out in 2010. I wrote Bastards of the Reagan Era. I wrote Felon, and then I wrote Redaction. Every single one of those books had no mission statement. They had no orientation for what I was trying to do in the world that I claimed, though. Forget what other people say about what the work is meant to do. Your question asked me what has changed, and actually the thing that has changed is I am trying to articulate what I want to do. And in doing that, I get to articulate what Felon was doing in ways that I didn't know when I wrote it. So when Doggerel comes out, the mission statement for Doggerel is to imagine a world that could be suffused with recognition of what matters. A world that could be suffused with joy, with love, with tenderness. A world that could be suffused with intimacy and a real understanding of what that means, which is there are people who die starving to be touched. And like Doggerel is a book that is both like sensuous and sincere and political in a way that like our politics should be governed by what we see every day. I just learned about the nutria. Y'all gotta know the nutria. The nutria? This is the thing, yo. If you grew up in prison, you pronounce everything wrong. Yo, but the cypresses and the fact that like you got a swamp rat that is destroying an ecosystem has to be enough to make you feel sorrow and enough to make you feel the kind of delight and noticing the role you might play in making the world different. So this is what Doggerel is about. It's about like delighting in small bits of information that lets you see the world different. That's my mission for Doggerel, and I think that's how it shifts from everything else I've ever written to who I try to be when I stand up in front of people now. Thank you for the question. It was quite lovely.
Thank you all so much for being here. Mr. Betts will be signing books at the table outside the bottle, so you can go get a line up there. Thank you all so much.